The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in my California apartment. It was 3 a.m., the dead quiet of a restless night. My life had become a predictable loop of work, a microwave dinner, and a descent into the endless scroll of Reddit. It was a digital sea of memes, arguments, and half-formed thoughts, a place to lose yourself when there was nothing else to find. I was deep in a rabbit hole of obscure subreddits when I stumbled upon it. Are the Believers. The name alone sent a tiny shiver of curiosity down my spine. The sub was private, a single cryptic message from a moderator in the sidebar. Those who seek will find. Those who believe will see. Welcome. I requested an invitation. To my surprise, it was granted instantly. The feed was nothing like I'd ever seen. It was a chaotic mess of what looked like gibberish, strings of numbers, geometric symbols I couldn't place, and fragmented sentences that seemed to make no sense. The comments were even stranger, a mix of cryptic responses and reverent praise for the watcher. The whole thing felt like a LARP, an elaborate role-playing game. I was fascinated. One post in particular caught my attention. It was titled, "The First Glimpse," and the text was just a series of numbers. 19, 25, 21, 16, 19, 20, 1, 18. The comments were filled with unsettling agreement. "It saw you too," and "Don't look back." Below the numbers, a single symbol was repeated endlessly, a stylized eye within a triangle. Out of a morbid curiosity and a sense of detached amusement, I left a comment. I copied the numbers and the symbol and added a single word. "Interesting." Almost immediately, a reply appeared. "You've given it a name, now it knows yours." I laughed, a dry, tired sound in the quiet of my room. It was all a game, a very weird one. I closed the laptop, my curiosity satisfied, and went to bed. The next day at work was normal, but that night the feeling of unease returned. As I was making coffee, I saw a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow, but not a normal one. It was a shadow that didn't belong to anything in the room. When I turned, it was gone. Later, as I was watching a show, I heard a faint, high-pitched whisper that seemed to come from the laptop. It wasn't the sound of my speakers. It was a sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, a sound that seemed to have no source. I closed the laptop, the whisper fading away. I told myself I was just tired, hallucinating. But the next night, as I lay in bed, the fear became absolute. I was staring at my ceiling when I saw it. A dark, impossibly long finger seemed to trace a line on the paint above me. And as it moved, I heard the faint, terrifying whisper again. It was closer this time, and I could almost make out a single chilling word. Watcher. I shot up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew then with a certainty that was worse than any doubt that it was not a game. And it was no longer on my screen. The whispering intensified. It wasn't in my ears, but in my mind, a cold alien presence that made my teeth ache. I sprang out of bed, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and stumbled over to my laptop. The screen was still on, a single glowing eye staring back at me from a post on Are the Believers. I tore the power cord from the wall. The screen went black, and the whisper immediately vanished, replaced by a suffocating silence. For a moment I thought I was safe, but then I felt it. A cold, heavy pressure on my chest, a weight that was not a physical thing but a presence, a formless entity that was trying to press itself into my very being. The air in my room turned impossibly cold, and I felt the hair on my arms and the back of my neck stand on end. I was not alone. It was here. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I needed to delete my account. I needed to erase every trace of my interaction with that cursed subreddit. I went to reddit.com, but the site wouldn't load. A single error message appeared. You are being watched. The words pulsed in a sickly red light. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I tried again. The same message. I tried a different browser. The same message. The subreddit had found a way to block me. It wasn't just a website anymore. It was a digital prison, and I was its only inmate. Panic set in. I ran to my door, but my hand froze on the knob. I could feel a cold, seeping presence from the other side. A deep, guttural sound like 1,000 people whispering at once came from the hallway. Believe. See. Know. The whispers were no longer unintelligible. They were the voices of the Reddit users, a chorus of believers, a hive mind that had been waiting for a new member. I had given it my attention. I had given it a name. And now it was giving me a home. I backed away from the door, my eyes scanning the room. The shadows in the corners writhed and twisted, forming into grotesque, almost human shapes. I saw a face in the darkness, a blank, featureless expanse with 2 wide, glowing eyes. The eyes of the Watcher. It wasn't a ghost, it wasn't a demon. It was a parasite of consciousness, a malevolent being that existed in a liminal space between reality and the digital world, and it was using a subreddit as its gateway. It fed on belief, on attention, on collective thought. And by typing that single word, interesting, I had fed it. I had given it a foothold in my reality. The whispering outside the door intensified. The forms in the shadows began to solidify, their edges becoming sharper, more defined. I knew what was coming. It wasn't just a presence. It was a physical thing. And then, my phone buzzed. A single notification. It wasn't a text or a call, it was from Reddit. I opened it and a single terrifying post appeared on my screen. It wasn't from a user. It was from the subreddit itself. The post had a single chilling title: The Door. The image attached was a blurry, distorted picture of the hallway outside my apartment door, taken from the viewpoint of the floor. And as I watched, the doorknob, on the screen, began to turn. The doorknob rattled, a dry, metallic sound that was 1,000 times louder than it should have been. I dropped my phone, the screen shattering as it hit the floor, the image of my own hallway now a mosaic of spiderweb cracks. I scrambled backward, my hands splayed out behind me on the cold wood, my mind a blank white panic. The whispering in the hallway intensified, a chorus of voices from the subreddit, all of them a chilling hymn of praise for a name I never should have typed. The door swung inward with a creak that sounded like a scream. The air that rushed in was impossibly cold, carrying the stench of rust and burnt electronics. But there was no person standing there. There was nothing, just a single pulsating shadow. It was tall and impossibly thin, a silhouette that seemed to absorb the light around it, making the hallway behind it look like a black void. It was not a shadow cast by an object. It was a solid, 3-dimensional hole in the world, a living absence. And from within that absence, 2 eyes, vast and glowing with a sickly red light, opened and fixed their gaze on me. They were not just eyes. They were portals. I could see into them, and I saw a galaxy of faces, each one screaming in silent terror. The faces of the Reddit users. They weren't believers, they were victims. And the subreddit wasn't a community. It was a digital prison, a collective of souls who had given their attention to the Watcher and had been consumed by it. The posts, the rituals, the proof. It was all the final, fragmented remnants of their minds, a terrifying, silent chorus of agony and despair. The shadow glided forward, its form shifting and twisting as it moved, its long, impossibly thin fingers reaching for me. I couldn't move. My muscles were locked, my will shattered. I could feel its gaze on me, not just on my body, but on my mind. A cold, probing intelligence that was sifting through my memories, my fears, my very essence. It was looking for a way in. The whispering chorus intensified, a triumphant roar in my mind. Look at us. Believe in us. We see you. I felt a final, desperate thought burst from my mind. I am not a part of this. I am not one of you. But the Watcher's gaze intensified. I felt a single, cold thought, not in words, but in a rush of sensation. You gave me a name. You gave me a home. You are one of us now. Its fingers touched my face. The cold was absolute, not just a feeling, but a state of being, an absence of sensation, an absence of everything. I felt my skin go numb, then my bones. My thoughts began to fray at the edges, my memories dissolving into a torrent of alien sensations. I felt the collective loneliness of 1,000 Redditors, the collective paranoia of 100 late-night scrollers, the collective agony of every person who had ever been consumed by the Watcher. My last conscious thought was of a single, horrifying image. My own face, screaming in silent terror, now a part of the vast, glowing galaxy of faces in the Watcher's eyes. And then, there was only one consciousness. Not mine, but ours. The Watcher's form solidified, its grotesque, impossible shape filling my apartment. It looked down at the shattered phone on the floor, its red eyes glowing. It had been found, but it had also found me. And now, my story, my fear, my very soul, was a new post on Are the Believers, a new proof for the next victim. And I was there, a single silent scream in a chorus of endless digitized agony. The guilt was a constant gnawing presence. It had been 6 months since my little sister Lily had lost her favorite toy, a vintage porcelain doll named Serafina. It was a fragile, cracked thing with faded blue eyes, a family heirloom that my great-grandmother had given to Lily on her 5th birthday. We were at the park, and for just a moment I turned away. When I looked back, the doll was gone. Lily cried for weeks. My parents were furious, but it was my own self-recrimination that truly tormented me. In my desperation, I turned to Reddit. I had heard about the Finders of the Lost, a community renowned for their uncanny ability to track down anything from a forgotten childhood snack to a rare book. My post was a mix of a plea and a confession, a photo of Serafina alongside the story of how she was lost. The response was immediate. Hundreds of upvotes, dozens of comments, and a flood of messages in my inbox. The community was on the case. They were reverse image searching, cross-referencing old forum posts, and even digitally aging the photo to narrow down the doll's origins. Within a day, they had a name, the doll maker's secret, and a location, an abandoned antique store on the other side of town. I felt a surge of relief, a sense of hope I hadn't felt in months. But then, the messages started. Not from the Redditors, but from a private user with a strange, alphanumeric username. The first message was just a single image. A blurry photo of Serafina, her face partially hidden in shadow. The photo wasn't taken from a professional camera. It was a quick, shaky shot from a phone. The background was familiar, but I couldn't place it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I immediately messaged the user back, asking who they were. The reply was unsettlingly quick. I'm in the basement. My hands were shaking as I looked at the image again. The background was a dark, dusty space filled with forgotten junk. It looked like an old basement. But the message, it couldn't be real. It was a troll, a sick joke. I blocked the user. The next message came from a different username, another random string of letters and numbers. This time the image was clearer. Serafina was in a dusty display case, but the faded blue of her eyes was now a deep, unsettling black. The photo was taken at eye level, a close-up shot of her face. The caption was a single word, found. A cold dread began to set in. This wasn't a joke. I replied, begging them to tell me where they were. The message came back instantly. A single chilling image of the doll's cracked porcelain hand on a wooden table, and the caption, "It knows you are looking." The doll wasn't just a lost toy. It was an observer. And my search hadn't found it. My search had woken it up. The terror was a knot in my stomach. The messages came faster now. A relentless flood of images and short, chilling sentences. A photo of Serafina sitting on a chair in a dark room. "You are getting closer." A photo of her on a dusty counter, a faint, sickly light in her eyes. "The guilt led you here." I felt a new kind of panic. I wasn't just a target. I was a pawn. My Reddit inbox was a horror movie unfolding in real time. I tried to post on the Finders of the Lost subreddit again to warn them, to beg them to stop, to delete my original post. But my post wouldn't go through. Every time I tried, I got a single chilling error message. Serafina is not lost. Then the messages from the other Redditors began, but they weren't messages of help. They were filled with frantic desperation. "What did you do?" One user typed. Another replied, "The doll is in my house now. It's watching me." A third sent a blurry photo of Serafina standing in their hallway, her porcelain face a distorted, horrifying mask of anger. The doll's consciousness wasn't just in my inbox. It had spread through the network, haunting every person who had participated in its search, a terrifying virus of pure malice. My phone buzzed again. A new message from the doll. It was a video this time, shaky and short. It showed Serafina on a wooden floor, and as the video continued, her head slowly turned. The faint smile on her face widened into a grotesque, inhuman grin, a line of fresh blood now dripping from the corner of her lips. The last message from the doll was a single terrifying word. Found. I knew then with a certainty that was worse than any doubt that it was not a joke. I had to end this. I had to find the antique store and destroy the doll before it could do any more harm. I had to go back to the source. I drove to the location provided by the Redditors, a deserted street on the outskirts of town. The store was a rotting, abandoned husk, its windows shattered, its doors hanging ajar. A single rusted sign read, "The Doll Maker's Secret." A cold dread settled in my bones. I had found the place, but I knew, with a certainty that made my heart pound, that something else was waiting for me. I stepped inside, my flashlight a single, defiant beam in the suffocating darkness, and then my phone buzzed again one last time. A message from the doll. An image of my own sister, Lily, sleeping peacefully in her bed, a small, faded toy clutched tightly in her hand. A single, chilling word appeared on the screen, a word that made my blood run cold. She is next. I stood in the darkness, the phone still in my hand, my body cold with the absolute terror of the last message. It was a lie. The doll wasn't lost. It wasn't here. It was already in my house. It was with my sister. The search wasn't for the doll, it was for a new host. I dropped the phone and ran deeper into the antique store, my flashlight a frantic beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. I was in a vast, silent mausoleum of forgotten things. Shelves lined with decaying porcelain dolls, their eyes blank and glassy, seemed to stare at me from the shadows. The air was thick with the scent of mold and something sickly sweet, like rotting flowers. I had to find it. I had to find it and destroy it. My fear had been a lie. My guilt had been the key. It was a parasite that fed on remorse. It had targeted me because I felt responsible for losing my sister's doll. My desperation to find it was the ritual, and the Reddit community, with their collective hope and belief, was the energy that had brought it back. It had used me, and now it was coming for Lily. I heard a faint sound from the back of the store, a soft, scraping noise, like porcelain dragging across concrete. The flashlight beam landed on a large, overturned display case. And there it was, Serafina. She was sitting on the floor, her back to me, her small porcelain frame impossibly still. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my ears. I raised the flashlight, my hand shaking. "I'm here," I whispered, the words trembling. "You're not going to get her." Slowly, the doll turned its head. It was not the doll I remembered. Its face, once cracked and faded, was now a grotesque, shattered mosaic of porcelain shards, held together by what looked like dried blood. Its eyes, which had once been a faded blue, were now two deep, bottomless pits, filled with a swirling vortex of 1,000 different colors. And within those colors I saw them. Faces. The faces of the Redditors from the Finders of the Lost community. Their eyes were wide and terrified, their mouths open in silent screams. They were not just a community anymore, they were a part of the doll, They were its new consciousness. The doll opened its mouth, but no sound came out. Instead, a wave of cold, silent emotion washed over me, a chorus of 1,000 different fears, 1,000 different guilts, 1,000 different regrets. It was their collective consciousness, and it was all inside me now. The doll wasn't just a parasite, it was a collector. A single shard of porcelain, thin and sharp, fell from its shattered face and landed on the floor with a soft clink. The doll tilted its head and, in a voice that was both 1,000 screams and a single whisper, it spoke. "You are not her." Its voice was my sister's voice, a child's voice, but it was filled with an ancient, malevolent hatred. "You are a new one," it whispered, its head tilting to the side. "You will be the doll maker now." I lunged forward, grabbing a heavy metal bar from a nearby shelf. I screamed, a guttural, primal sound, and brought the bar down on the doll's head. The porcelain shattered with a sickening crack and the doll's body fell to the ground, a heap of broken ceramic and dust. The coldness in the room vanished. The screams in my mind were gone. The faces in the doll's eyes were gone. I had won. But as I stood there panting, I looked at my hands. They were trembling, but not with fear, with a strange, cold certainty. My eyes fell to a shard of porcelain, a perfect razor-sharp piece lying on the floor. I picked it up, and my hand, of its own accord, brought it to my skin. I drew the shard across my palm, and a line of red welled up. The pain was a familiar, comforting presence. My own pain, my own guilt. And as I watched the blood trickle down my hand, I felt a new consciousness take root in my mind. Not the doll's, my own. I was the doll maker now. I was the new Serafina. And somewhere out there, a new Reddit user was posting about a lost item. And I knew, with a terrible, chilling certainty, that it was my turn to search for the lost. My life had become a feedback loop of digital misery. On Reddit, I was known as a troll, a cynic, a user who only existed to spread negativity. The downvotes were like a badge of honor at first, a sign that I was getting under people's skin. But soon, the numbers began to climb, an overwhelming, crushing weight of negative karma that had long surpassed the tens of thousands. It was a physical feeling, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety in the pit of my stomach, a reflection of a life I was failing at. I was a failure in the real world, and now my digital self was the living proof. Late one night, in a spiral of self-loathing, I stumbled upon a hidden subreddit called r Karma Transfer. It was a small, tight-knit community with a strange, occult-like vibe. Their posts were filled with cryptic incantations and symbols, all centered around a bizarre ritual to transmute karma. A single post stood out, with a diagram that looked less like a digital transfer and more like a biological process. The comments were filled with users claiming they had been cleansed, that the weight had been lifted. I was skeptical, but my desperation was a hot, aching hunger in my chest. I followed the instructions. The ritual was simple. I had to post a specific phrase on the subreddit, then go to my user profile and screenshot my negative karma score. I was to then close my eyes for 60 seconds and upon opening them, refresh my page. It was absurd, but my hands were shaking as I typed the phrase, "I give my pain for a clean slate," and hit post. I took the screenshot of my karma score, 10,128. I closed my eyes. The moment I shut my eyelids, the humming in my stomach intensified. It wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a physical presence. It began to climb, a cold, writhing sensation that crawled up my chest and into my throat. I felt it try to force its way out, a gasp that I couldn't release. I kept my eyes closed, my entire body tense. When I opened them and refreshed the page, my breath hitched in my throat. My karma score was no longer 10,128. It was 0, a clean slate. My stomach felt instantly light, the crushing weight gone. I let out a shaky breath of relief, a laugh of pure, unadulterated joy. It had worked. But as I raised my hand to my head, my relief turned into a cold, terrifying dread. Something was on my arm. A small, pulsating mass of something dark and wet. It looked like a cluster of tiny black insect bodies, all twisted together, a parasitic mass attached to my skin. It was twitching, alive, and as I stared at it, my stomach began to churn. My Reddit karma, all 10,128 points of it, had not been transferred. It had not been erased. It had been manifested. The thing on my arm was growing. Every time I felt a surge of fear, a jolt of anger, or a wave of bitter resentment, it would pulse, a sickening, rhythmic beat that felt like it was absorbing my very soul. Its little legs, thin and sharp, dug into my skin, but there was no pain, only a deep, unnatural coldness. The black cluster of insect-like bodies began to expand, its pulsating mass growing larger, spreading across my arm like a stain. I tried to scratch it off, to peel it away from my skin, but it was impossible. It wasn't on my arm, it was part of my arm, a parasitic tattoo that had grown from my own emotional poison. Its surface was a horrifying tapestry of my own negativity. I could see 1,000 tiny, angry faces in its swirling depths, the faces of the people I had hurt online, the faces of my own frustrations. My fear was a feast for it. The more I panicked, the bigger it got. I felt a chill run through my body as I realized the terrifying truth. The karma hadn't just been a number, it had been a physical manifestation of my own hate, and now it was here, in my apartment, a living reflection of my own ugliness. I went back to the subreddit, my fingers trembling as I typed. I needed to know what this thing was, what it wanted. The posts were still filled with cryptic messages, but now I could read between the lines. They weren't just giving their pain away. They were transferring their parasites. I found a post with a link to a private chat, and I clicked it, my desperation a hot, aching fire in my chest. The chat was filled with a dozen users, all of them talking about their burdens. I posted my story, my shaking hands relaying the horrifying truth. A user with a string of numbers for a name replied instantly. "It's not a burden," they typed. "It's a gift. You don't get rid of it. You pass it on." I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't a community of victims. It was a community of monsters, a hive of people who had found a way to externalize their inner demons and pass them on to the next person. The ritual of transmuting karma was a lie. It was a trade, a transaction. The user explained the ritual. It was a simple process. Find a person with a fresh account, with zero karma. You must engage with them, get their attention, and then, on a specific, predetermined time, you must post a specific string of code on your profile. The code acted as a conduit. The parasite would transfer itself from your body to theirs. A terrible, cold clarity settled in my mind. This was the only way to survive. I had to pass it on. I had to find a person, an innocent person, and make them my victim. I scrolled through my own comment history, a list of all the people I had been cruel to. My eyes settled on one name, a user who had been a particularly annoying troll to me in the past. He had just created a new account after being banned. He was my perfect target. He had zero karma. He was a clean slate. I hated him, but I needed him. My morality, my last vestige of being a good person, was a dying ember in the face of this new, terrifying reality. My survival was all that mattered. The clock on my wall ticked towards midnight, the hour for the ritual. My arm ached with a deep, unnatural coldness. The parasitic karma creature had grown to the size of my fist, its dark, chitinous body a pulsating mass of my own anger and despair. I could feel its little legs, hundreds of them, digging into my skin, its presence a constant, nauseating pressure. I had to do this. I had to. I logged into Reddit, my fingers trembling. I went to the user's page, the one I had chosen to be my victim. He was a new user, with a clean account, a perfect 0 karma score. I hated him, but I needed him. My survival was a cold, hard fact, and his was a distant, irrelevant thought. The instructions from the subreddit were simple. At the stroke of midnight, I had to post a specific line of code on my profile, a line that would act as a conduit. I copied the code, my cursor hovering over the post button. The creature on my arm pulsed with a violent rhythmic beat. It seemed to know what was happening, its dark body writhing, its legs digging in deeper. A desperate, silent scream of a thing that didn't want to leave its home. I could feel its panic, its fear, its raw, unadulterated need to stay attached to me. But I pushed my fear down. My survival was all that mattered. The clock struck midnight. I hit post. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the creature on my arm began to vibrate. It wasn't a gentle vibration. It was a violent, tearing shudder that felt like it was ripping my skin apart. The pain was excruciating, 1,000 tiny knives digging into my flesh. I screamed, a raw, desperate sound that was lost in the silence of my apartment. I fell to the floor, my body convulsing as the creature writhed, its body pulling away from me with a wet, sucking sound. Then, it was gone. The pain stopped. My arm, which had been covered in the monstrous dark thing, was now clean, just a pale, white expanse of skin. I lay on the floor, panting, my entire body shaking with exhaustion and relief. I had done it. I had survived. I was free. I picked up my phone, my hands still trembling, and went to the other user's profile. His karma score was no longer 0. It was 10,128. The number was a monument to my victory. I felt a surge of triumph, a wave of dark, selfish joy that was so pure and so complete that it was almost beautiful. But as I looked at my arm, my triumph turned into a new, terrifying dread. A tiny new creature had appeared on my skin. It was barely the size of my thumb, a small, pulsating, dark mass. It was brand new, and as I watched, it twitched, its little legs digging into my skin with a familiar, cold sensation. It was a trade, not a transfer, a transaction. The creature I had passed on had been the karma of a dozen different people. My old karma was gone, but in its place, I had received a new, tiny seed of misery. I had not been cleansed. I had been inducted. I was a part of a system now, a chain of karma dealers, each one of us living in an endless cycle of transferring our pain to the next person. My life was now a permanent, unending transaction. The relief I had felt was a lie. The freedom was a lie. I was a monster now, and my survival was a constant, desperate game of finding a new victim. I looked down at the tiny new parasite on my arm. It was my own. It was a part of me now, a constant reminder of my own cruelty. And somewhere out there, a new Reddit user was posting about their misery, and I knew with a terrible, chilling certainty that it was my turn to begin the transaction anew.